Welcome to the Friday at 4 podcast series with your host Charles Luttrell and co-host Steve Kent.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Friday at 4. How is everyone?
Alert.
You are alert.
Ooh,
Steve,
that
welcome
makes one
back.
of us. I'm somewhat alert, but okay.
Welcome to the Friday at 4 podcast series. I'm glad you were able to join us today. I really appreciate this. It's exciting to have another guest on. It's been a while since we had a guest.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm happy to be here.
Glad that you're here too.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and get this started with our topic today, which is communication. Who wants to start?
If that's your field,
Oh my
I'll
goodness. I mean, in my world, it's a hot topic. I can talk about this in all kinds of ways, but I guess maybe we could start by what are your thoughts? And we can kind of riff on that. Like from the perspective of, let's say, communication and business.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking was, since I have two experts here on one that's in financial and you with communication with, your business with English, you're teaching. So my thought process was, how do we tie communication to what we're doing in the business world, with proper communication, maybe how to communicate, what are some great bullet points on, great communication with people.
all right, so I'll chime in. And as I say every week, this is just a bunch of people talking. Um, you're gonna get our feelings, right or wrong. This is what we feel. We're not sponsored by anybody, so this is what you're getting. Okay, now I've said that piece. Now we'll go on. Um, I was in corporate for 32 years, and my experience, which I'm sure Julie can attest to, there is not enough communication.
Yes.
So that's between management, that's between non-management, and that's between management and non-management. So it's across and it's up and down. Um, One of the biggest downsides that I've experienced is on the appraisal process. Now it's widespread, and I get that, but I'm going to hone in on one particular area, and it's appraisals. And I was fairly high up in several companies, so I got to see some of the inside stuff of what should happen and what really happens, which are sometimes pretty different. And what happens, in my opinion, and what I've seen is you can have an employee at whatever level who does a job, whatever that may be, but they're never given feedback. Is it good? Is it not good? What do you need to improve? So when it comes to the annual appraisal, that's the first time that Julie walks in and Julie's told, you know what? You really didn't do these 97 things right. Therefore, no raise, no bonus. By the way, you're getting demoted, etc., etc. Now, for whatever reason, that communication didn't happen, but there's no training by senior management for Steve to give that feedback to Julie on a regular basis. So not only is it not fair to Julie, but the work suffers, the company suffers because they're not getting what they want, but Julie has no idea that she's even doing something wrong.
Hmm?
No idea. And
Yeah,
that's a problem.
yeah. Julie.
Yeah, so in our work, we support, coach, and train international professionals who are working in English as their target language. It gives
Okay.
us a glimpse into many different industries. Um, to your point, yes, in the consultation process, when we have a new client, I will often ask, have you received feedback about your communication skills? Was there anything in your annual review? And sometimes yes, but it's rare. And if somebody said yes, we want you to be able to more confidently interact with clients, something specific like that is great. That's exactly what we're looking for and the information I need to better support them. But more often than not, it's nothing, it's vague to nothing. Like be better.
Right. Be better.
And
Yeah, right.
to your point, a lot of those, are often cast aside or pushed to the last second, or, they're cranked out right before the deadline when it's annual review time, and they become
Mhm.
meaningless
Correct.
because the manager is just rushing through them for protocol at that point. And,
Right.
what does that mean? And so our clients are generally very conscientious, and they want to do a good job. They want to grow their careers. They take it all seriously. So it's extremely confusing to get vague to nothing
Uh,
as feedback about, where you go next to here,
Yeah.
from here. Um, on the other side, I've had plenty of clients who are managers who are responsible for those performance
Mhm.
reviews,
Mhm.
and they want to do right by the people there who are working under them, but then they need a little bit of help with how to express themselves in English in a way that the employee is going to hear it, and that it's
Yeah.
professional.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting because we just see so much. And so for me, um, communication is the neglected skill set. In a lot of organizations, people just assume it's happening, that the right person's talking to the right people, that the chain that has been set up is functioning. And honestly, most of the time it isn't.
But see that to me, there's two main reasons. One is
Mhm,
exactly what you just said, but another reason is not everybody wants to give feedback because it
mhm,
can become uncomfortable.
mhm.
So people
Yeah.
avoid it like the plague. And
Yeah.
yeah, it has that expression go, you can run, but you can't hide. So I
Mhm.
Yeah.
can run from giving feedback to Chuck, but at some point, it's got to come to the top because he's going to want a review. He's going to want a raise, he's going to want a promotion. And by lack of communication, you're going to take Chuck, who's a great performer, given some feedback,
Mhm.
is going to exit stage left.
You know what's interesting
Now,
too about that is that during my tenure and the customer service world and the corporate world, call center world, people were afraid of those difficult conversations. It made it difficult for people because they didn't know how to give that feedback. So the communication wasn't well because they expected one thing from the other side, it was something else. So, through the year, through the months,
mhm,
that communication was broken. And I can only imagine on Julie's side when you're having that, there's the language barriers, right? That could
mhm,
be a
Yeah.
whole another thing. You're trying to get something smoother with language barriers or teaching them how to speak properly. So I can see this huge challenge right there, right?
Yes, and it's interesting when we do have people who have the support of their organization who are sent to us. Um, we'll we like to talk to supervisors and managers to get their perspective. And we found many times, because we've been doing this 15 years now with one-to-one coaching, um, it's pushed back on the non-native English speaker. So there's a communication issue
mhm.
within the department or the team,
Okay.
and it's an easy I want to say it's not intentional. I don't think people are doing this intentionally, but it's like, okay, we know that communication is not very effective on our team. Oh, it must be because we have this one person over here who doesn't, who isn't, English is not their first language. So they'll often come to us and say, well, I have a problem with my English, or I need to improve my business English. And then we'll dig into it, and they're beyond functional. They're fine.
Mm,
And then we start to look at email chains and and we get to see the dynamics of their team through some of the team communication that's going on. And we can give an objective evaluation back to that person. Okay, here are the issues the real ones you are actually having with the language, but really this is a team problem,
right.
and you're the scapegoat. And interestingly enough, the thing that managers will often say is like, oh, he needs help with pronunciation, or she needs help with pronunciation. That's the issue. And it's almost never that. It's only one time truly been that. And that for whatever reason, it's like they hear accent, and then that's just an easy thing to say, okay, well, this is the reason why things are
But,
disconnecting on our team.
but even if the excuse, again, right or wrong, even if the excuse happens to be they don't understand English, what are you doing to help the person improve? So you're doing something to eliminate the problem or, make the problem better or whatever, or lessen the problem. But if you're just ignoring, because, we all know it's easier to blame somebody else for something than to take ownership of a problem.
And part of that too is like with what you do, Steve, because Julie, that's definitely a big part of what you do, in your business is, this teaching and training of this language. But like with what you do, Steve, I'm going to try to compare, like with documentation, explaining your business to what a potential client. So if you sit down and you have difficulties, telling them what you're asking for on paperwork, oh, that's a whole other communication breakdown, right? A whole other issue that we have to deal with.
It could. And so what I do when I get into those situations where somebody really doesn't understand, I'll take it down like to its simplest level to try to make them understand. Because in the financial world, if I do something that the person doesn't understand, first of all, it's wrong. But if I do something the person doesn't understand and they end up finding out that things are not right and they complain, I could lose my license. They could take me to
Mhm.
court. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
So I would rather take that extra little bit of time and explain it. And I've never gotten into the situation, but if I ever get into that one where after trying and trying and trying and the person doesn't get it, I will excuse myself and walk away because
Mhm.
I'm not going to put somebody in a position they're not comfortable with, which could eventually come back to me. I'd rather walk away and do the right thing. It's sad because the person needs the assistance, but you got to think bigger picture.
Let's start with you, Julie. I'm just curious, because this is something you do on more, you probably see this more than we do because of your business. So how does that start, right? So take us to the very beginning of some type of like, if there is a communication problem, what does it look like, right? Where does it start?
Um, with Okay, so with our clients, it's one of two things or a mix. Um, they are maybe in their first position that's really truly high level, where previously they thought their communication skills were okay, but now they're really having to up level. And they feel out of their depth and they want to be better. Or there's the perception that everybody else is like this excellent communicator and that they're not going to be promoted or they're out of their depth. So what I want to say is that more often than not, because of the unique nature of our work, we see that the real problem is the team communication dynamics.
Mm.
And that, organizations don't generally not very few have like a style guide or sort of a guide and like this is how we communicate in the culture of this organization.
Mhm.
And one of the biggest areas of confusion is that in American business culture, it's different depending upon region, it's different depending upon field, it's different depending upon organization. And whereas like if you were working in the UK, there's a formality that's pretty consistent. And so that's a lot easier for people because there's a consistency to, whereas if I were too formal working for a tech startup in my speech or my writing, I'm going to come across as weird and an outlier and I'm not going to be included in the team. So I tell the clients, I need to see more and hear more because I need to understand the culture of your organization and what is their culture of communication, which is very rarely defined, right? But everybody
Yeah.
has one
Sure.
and they're constantly trying to figure it out and how they're going to fit in there. And so they'll often, like particularly with email, they will copy some of the phrases that they see their colleagues using as an effort to fit in or to make sure that they're communicating in the way that's expected. This often leads to, this horrible corporate meaningless jargon that is popular in some fields that You know, they'll use certain words and I say, what does that mean? And then they'll say, I actually don't know. I just hear everybody using it, so I thought I should use it too. Um, so we work a lot on that. Like, okay, if you're in a jargon-filled industry where people expect to hear those things, no wonder you're confused. It's not that you didn't understand what was happening, it's that they're having meaningless conversations using meaningless words.
Right.
And now you need to decide if you're going to set the bar higher and just use clear and simple language
Hmm.
while understanding that this is the jargon and the lingo that these people are choosing to use, or um, maybe selectively use some of those phrases here and there to demonstrate belonging. Happens a lot in consulting. Cannot get people in consulting to stop using meaningless jargon.
Meaningless
Well,
jargon, right?
Right. Whereas
it's
if you're working in a law firm, you're not going to do that. You're going to be as clear. You're never going to say anything that could be misinterpreted.
but consultants are deemed to be this expert, and whatever they say, people believe, whether they're
Yeah.
right,
Right.
wrong.
Hmm.
So you throw out these terms, who knows, even if they know what it means, but
Hmm.
they want to sound intelligent. They
Right.
do.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, not a
Right.
quick
And
question.
and often the clients suspect that. They just need an outside person to validate it.
Mhm.
They're like, I leave these meetings and I'm so confused. And I was like, well, do you have the recording or the notes? Or it was like, oh, well, no wonder you're confused. Nobody said anything of meaning. This is not a
Right.
listening comprehension problem. This is a blustering
Right.
problem.
Yeah.
So, quick question. So, Steve and I dealt with this a lot over our careers. Do you guys, in your field, do you record calls and listen and provide feedback so they can actually hear what they sound like? Is that something that is in your industry or?
Sure, yeah. If people are working on how they sound, and their kind of executive presence or their public speaking skills, or if they have
Mhm.
like, pronunciation issues. Um, but the issue now and always, it really just depends, right? Some people are working in sensitive fields where you're just not going to record something that has anything to
Yeah.
do with your work, on a third
Right.
party app.
Right.
So it's about permission more than anything.
But you also have to make sure the state that you're in, is it a one party
Right,
or a two party?
Hmm.
It's a one
Yeah.
party state.
right.
So you don't have to
And
tell
the
them you're
IT
recording it.
sector does not care about this. It's like you log on with somebody and their bot is already recording and you never had that conversation. Like it's a standard practice from
Mhm.
Silicon Valley to just record every single meeting and then use the AI software to translate it without ever asking permission. And I was like, oh, this is such an East Coast, West Coast breakdown.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. If you
Yeah.
do it
We don't do
here,
that on the East
you
Coast. We
could
don't
get
just go around
sued.
recording people
That's why
without their
there's
consent.
That's why there's a lot of calls when you get on, it
Hmm.
says we're going to record this for
Hmm.
quality assurance purposes. That's their way
Absolutely.
of nicely saying we're recording this without
Yeah.
coming right out and saying, hey, buddy, we're coming after you. Be careful what you
Yeah.
say. That's how they get away with it. So
Hmm.
you've
Yeah.
been
Okay.
warned.
Yeah.
You've been warned.
Especially here in Maryland, where you have to have permission to record audio and video
Hmm.
Mhm.
inside a business. And you outside you're fine because it's public, public area. But if you're in a business, you have to let people know that they're being recorded. So it's a huge lawsuit.
Frankly, to me, should be.
Absolutely.
It should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I definitely noticed that as a trend. It's just an assumption because it's just the culture
Mhm.
of so much of the IT sector. It's like
Yeah, I
we
like
don't
how you said
have
an
a
East Coast,
conversation
West
about
Coast
it.
thing.
What's that?
I like how you said an East Coast, West Coast thing. I get it, right? Because it's so
But
like
it
the
is.
opposite of what we
Yeah.
do.
But it is
Yeah, and it's
sometimes.
news to people who maybe haven't worked in this country all that long. I said, is anybody asking you that you want to be recorded? Because they really need to be
Yeah.
disclosing that. This is not an assumption.
Yeah. Yeah, the
It's
company I
different.
worked for, it was in the all your paperwork when you signed in the beginning in training, they told you that you're signing
Mm.
this for you let you know that you will be listening to your calls, everything's recorded, so you know that this is all happening.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So I ask you the question. How many people really read those documents when they get employed? Sign here, sign here, sign here. It's like going for a
Yeah,
mortgage.
right.
Yeah.
You're signing 27 documents, one after the other. You don't know what you're signing. It's the
Let's
same
get
thing.
through it.
Excuse me.
Let's get through
You
it.
don't know.
Right.
So I would like to talk for a bit about email because 30 years in, we're still terrible at it.
What you
and it's
got?
becoming a generational divide with the
Hmm.
younger workforce as well.
Yep.
Mm.
Um, and it's something that I don't have any answers. But it's amazing to me that 30 years in, we are still bad at it. And the way I always tell people, the way it's supposed to be used or what it's good for versus what it's actually good for is like, this is the worst
Hmm.
form of communication. You're putting something out into the world or to another person that is now the ball is in their court, and now you just sit and wait, sometimes
Mm.
for perpetuity.
Yeah.
It's so inefficient.
Yep. It is.
Yes.
But younger people
Yeah.
are loath to have face-to-face meetings. And then, of course, remote work
Mm.
has brought us all kinds of benefits, but there's
Mhm.
certainly pitfalls.
Right.
Um, and I've just seen too many organizations where, again, without a defined policy or any thought given to how do we do this best, email communication becomes forwarding an entire chain to a colleague and then expecting them to read 2 weeks worth of a chain and then
They're
somehow,
not.
consolidate that and reply. And that's still very common.
Yeah.
Um, and it's kind of shocking to me. Like now we have the AI that can summarize very quickly for you. But
Yeah.
again, that has to do with the organization and the sensitivity of the information and whether or
Mm.
not, you can actually
Mhm.
run it through the
Yeah.
third-party AI um,
Yeah. That's
platform.
that's true.
But it's amazing to me. I've just it it's that people still operate that way, that this is a working style, and it takes up so much of the day, right? Like just responding to your inbox takes up so much of the day if that's the
But
Yeah,
way of communicating and
and
writing.
yeah.
yeah, one thing I would say real quick is I think what I hate about email and text is that there's no emotion. So if the
Mm.
person's emotional and they're reading it, they're going to take it the way they want to take it.
Hmm.
And so many times that an email or a text gets the wrong message across because of the way it was communicated and
Mhm.
the way the other person heard it versus how I wrote it or sent it, you
Mm.
know?
Yeah.
So I was taught way back when you want to send an email, write your email and put it in drafts, then come back later and read it again. Because if you write that email when you're emotional, for whatever reason, up or down, you may put something in that email you're going to be sorry for, and you hit that send button. No. So always read it, come back later when you got a cool head, read it again. Does it really say what it's supposed to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do either of you allot a time in a day to check email, or do you just do email on the fly?
I try to allot it, but it's just difficult for me. There's something about, well, of course, this has been studied. I think it's like that dopamine hit you get,
Mm.
even if it's not enjoyable. It's not like I want to spend my day reading and responding to email, right? But it's that dopamine hit that you get from, ooh, I have a new email, right? Like I'm that type of communicator, and because I'm a writer, it it's I have to really, who was it? Somebody wrote an excellent article about this. I'll find it later and I'll mention it, about how they just regret email because it's taking up so much time in their life. So I
Yeah.
have tried to block times. I definitely I don't have email inbox open while I'm doing deep task work.
Right.
I hide it from myself.
So that stops you.
And I always tell the clients, like, don't work on your phone.
Mm.
Don't do that,
Right.
especially if it's important.
Right.
Checking email and phone is for quick, like, okay, yeah, got it. It shouldn't be for any
Mm.
more than that. And
Agreed.
so many of the communication breakdowns we see over email, when clients are able to send email chains to us, was like, oh, they're like, I wrote this and I got this response, and the problem is my English. And I was like, no, you wrote a direct question here that's perfectly clear, and you got a nonsense answer
Okay.
that has nothing to do with the question. That is somebody reading and scrolling on their phone,
Mm-hmm.
in a
Mm-hmm.
hurry or on the subway.
Right.
Like, this
Yeah.
Right.
isn't you.
No, no. See, I don't have scheduled times. I check randomly because I'm always concerned that if something comes in that's time sensitive, if I don't get to it, that's why I check once every hour or whatever. I just really quickly what came in. There, it also stops the emails from building up and building up and building up because I am checking it so frequently.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, it's a
again,
good
that
point.
works for me. So
Well, and I would figure because you're, as well as I know you, with your structure, I would have expected that you would have had a block of an hour of your day to say, "Yes, I'm gonna check email," and that's it.
although I will tell you that my favorite key on the keyboard is the delete key.
Delete.
I'm only kidding. I don't do that. But yeah. Although it's tempting, but I don't do that.
Yeah, I deleted a text and marked it as junk the other day, and I was kind of upset. Am I going to get the emails? And I need it because to get my website login, it has to text me a code now.
Mm.
And I marked it as junk. I'm like, oh no, but it kind of came back. So it's working again. So, okay.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
So,
And you got to be careful with that.
yeah, well, when you're quick on the fly, like this is what happens.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
Yeah,
Ugh.
I don't know. So, what you got next?
Um, well, I don't have any answers, but my understanding is that the youngest part of the workforce actually views email as very old-fashioned. The way that we would consider, like, if I wanted to communicate with you at work, I would write you a handwritten letter,
Mm.
Oh,
like
wow.
something from another era.
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
I'm hearing all kinds of things. Well, two things I'm seeing. Um, because they're so attuned to text, which I can't organize. I try not to do, I will move
Mm.
important conversations off of text, and onto email because then I can revisit it on my own time. I don't know how anybody organizes themselves and keeps important information straight if it's all in their phone,
Mm.
not categorized.
Right.
I think a lot of young people are just used to that, but so they get overwhelmed by email. I had a younger friend who told me once that sometimes when things just pile up too much, there might be like 500 unread messages and she'll just delete the whole thing
Wow.
because she's so overwhelmed. And I'm like, well, I can't really do that. I wouldn't have a successful business.
There you
That is
go.
the
Okay.
truth.
But it's a growing problem, and I think it brings up a question of what's going to happen in the future. What I tell younger clients in their 30s and maybe younger is that, well, it's still the dominant form of business communication
Mm.
right now, so it kind of
Mhm.
doesn't matter if you like it or not,
Yeah,
or if you prefer it or not. Like, the other
but
thing
it
that's
is.
happening is in IT and other areas where people use Slack as the primary
Mm. Hmm.
communication tool, where they're just so used to having that communication tool open all day long with
Right.
one-line responses, they're losing their ability to read and write
Hmm.
or anything, and even pay attention.
Yeah.
Um, I had 4 consultations in late 2024 where different people told me I can't focus on anything more than a paragraph anymore, and I know that's a
Wow.
problem. They all worked in IT.
Wow.
Wow.
And I said, well, what's your communication tool at work? It's Slack. I was like, okay, so all day long, you're just like, yeah, got it, this, that, what's the
Hmm.
problem? Nothing deep,
That's why.
nothing.
Yep.
So I think this is a big concern. They don't like it.
Mm.
Um, and they come to us kind of asking like, okay, how can I fix this? And it's really
Mm.
about rewiring the brain and attention and like the ways
Right.
that we
Right.
communicate. So I'm a little bit scared. Like I think a lot of times when errors happen and mistakes happen, it's because people's brains are being rewired
Hmm.
in the wrong
Yeah.
direction,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, and
absolutely.
I don't know how we're going to get that
Yeah.
back for the younger generations, and if we can get
Yeah.
it back. And so either we'll
I don't
die
know.
one day and no one will use email anymore, and something will shift, and people will communicate at work in a different way, or I don't know. But right now, with all of the generations being in the workforce at the same time, it's often a conflict. And so,
Yeah.
that's
Agreed.
the expectation, but younger people don't. It's maybe their first job and they don't understand that that's the expectation. And if
Hmm.
nobody has taught them that, they're just seen as this person who never responds to anything.
And it
Agreed.
ties direct to the whole thing that we started about why this whole Friday at 4 is happening right now is because the subject was about communication. And, you brought up a very good point with it, is email is a bad part of communication because everybody sees it a different way. It's the same tool, but we all use it and see it as a different way.
Correct.
Amazing.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
And
What a
if you
great
need it for a paper
conversation.
trail, it's great.
Yeah, right. What a great conversation. I think,
Yeah.
this is why I love what I do on this series, because we can have a conversation about, pick a topic and look at what we got from this, right? Because there's so many things that we can talk about and branch off
Yeah.
and really cover. But yet it's such a huge, we just opened up a can of worms at this, right? Because now communication is so non-communicating that
It's not.
it's a tough topic, right?
It is. It is.
Yeah,
Yeah, and everything's changing so rapidly. So, in
so
my
fast.
field, like 2 years ago and even a year ago, there was the big fear of, well, is AI going to replace everything, right? And now
Right.
we're in this space where we see that it's not perfect. Um, but for our clients, it's been a game changer because they never have to sound unprofessional in writing ever again, right? They can clean up their English. They can sound like a very sophisticated native speaker, and most of them use it some with the blessing of their employer, some in secret. Um, and but nobody should really be sending a sloppy or unclear email in 2025,
Right.
right? And you have
That
all
is
of
the
these
truth.
tools available to you to
It's
be as
true.
clear as
So true.
possible. I tend to be a wordy person, so I will often use it to be like, take this sentiment and cut it in half. Like, what am I missing
Uh,
here? Like, make this as clear as possible. Or sensitive situations, it's great for that, at least to get some ideas about how to say things differently.
Yeah.
But we're seeing the limitations now, and I think we all know, like, when we're interacting with a bot, right? Like, that's still pretty clear.
yeah.
Um,
Very, very, very clear. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
and I think people
Yeah.
don't like it. So I think from a customer service perspective, too many companies jumped on this technology as a way to save money, cut out most of their human customer service
Mm.
people, and then forced us all to interact with bots. And now there's starting to be pushback. So I think there's real space there for any company that's willing to still invest in that, because everybody at the end of the day just wants their problem solved
Sure.
by a
Sure.
human who
Yeah.
has the
I
power
think we
to
should
actually.
I think we should come back on another segment on the AI, because Steve and I had a
Yeah.
great conversation about AI
Yeah.
before.
Mhm.
And I think we hit on it pretty good, but I think we could really expand on that with Julie
Yeah.
even more, because I know you have a whole other side of how, AI can work with what you're doing, because then that becomes
Mm.
a legal issue, correct? I mean, if I'm not mistaken, that can be some legal ramifications from that in what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
it's all still the Wild West. We just don't see a lot of companies that have defined policies.
Yeah.
Or typically a company will want to be seen as progressive, that, yeah, we love AI, we absolutely encourage it. Like, well, what are you doing to protect your data,
Well,
and your
yeah.
sensitive information? So, it's still kind of all over the map right
Yeah.
now. And we
You
have
got it.
people who, you know, they know they can use it to their advantage for their career, but because it's an undefined policy, they kind of don't want anybody at work to know, because nobody ever said, you know, use Copilot or use ChatGPT or use this tool that we paid for, um, or don't, it's all happening so fast. And I think
Yeah.
companies and organizations are going to have to develop some clear policies in the coming year,
And
and then
hopefully they communicate.
communicate them to their employees.
You beat me to it. I was going to
Why do
say, I
that?
hope they
Okay.
can communicate it.
All right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Steve, Julie, thanks for coming on. It's been a great episode, man.
Absolutely.
It's so very informative. I love the topic. I want
Mhm.
us to continue this conversation. Definitely another up and coming Friday at 4.
Mhm.
I think there's so much more we can do with this, so much we can talk about. And I know, especially like with Steve and I with the AI, I'd love to get Julie's take on the AI as well, because I know Steve
Yeah.
and I had a really great conversation about it. And I think I would love to expand on that. So maybe next time we can
Yeah.
talk about the AI.
Sure.
So
All
Yeah.
right. That
awesome.
works.
Yeah,
Good stuff.
absolutely. Well, I appreciate you guys coming on.
Yeah.
The Friday at 4, Steve, because
It's 4 o'clock somewhere. See, it took me a while to get that down pat. Okay.
Julie, he's been working that. This is episode 23, and he's been working that for 23
We're still
episodes.
working on it. Okay.
He's getting
I think you
it.
nailed it.
He nailed it. But
That's it.
Julie,
I'm
thanks for
good.
coming on and sharing the knowledge. Steve, again, thanks for coming back again
Absolutely. Great to meet you,
and having
Julie.
some insight here. I'm sorry I forgot to introduce you guys on the podcast. Maybe we can do that next time. I'm sorry.
No
That
problem.
works.
So,
All right,
yeah.
you got it.
Thanks,
Awesome.
everybody. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Julie, thanks. Steve, thanks for coming
Thank
on.
you.
And well, we'll talk soon.
You got
Have a
it.
great weekend.
Thanks. You
Take care.
too.
Have a great
Thanks.
weekend, guys.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
You've been watching the Friday at 4 podcast series with your host Charles Luttrell and co-host Steve Kent. Thanks for watching.